درست است؟ صدا میاد؟ صدا میاد؟ یک دو سه.
It's impossible to get close to this man at present. He's the Taliban's #1 target. This unprecedented interview was filmed remotely, in maximum security conditions, with a neutral background, dim lighting, and every word carefully chosen. Nothing should make it possible to locate Khalid Amiry, the man who has spent the last 2 years resisting the Taliban.
سلام.
Khalid Amiry's story is rooted in the Panjshir province. The mountains were his playground. His father had fought for Ahmad Massoud, the national hero who came from the province. And as he grew up, Khalid Amiry heard many stories of Commander Massoud's brave exploits. This military leader, known as the Lion of Panjshir, first gained his reputation from his victories against the Soviets in the 1980s. It was further strengthened through his resistance against the Taliban's first coup in 1996. Under the leadership of Ahmad Massoud, Panjshir never fell into the hands of those who wanted to control it. But Ahmad Massoud was assassinated in September 2001. Even today, the scars of this war-torn past still saturate the landscape. The culture and the history of the land, imbued with legendary heroism, are what shaped Khalid Amiry, a young colonel in the Afghan Special Forces, destined to become the leader of the resistance in Panjshir. A few days before the fall of Kabul, Khalid Amiry was sent to the south of Afghanistan, to Lashkar Gah in Helmand province, the Taliban stronghold. His mission was to maintain a regular army presence there for as long as possible. Khalid Amiry was a highly respected officer in the Special Forces, known for defeating the Taliban several times in the north of the country. But here in Helmand province, the situation was critical. Khalid Amiry knew the province would fall into the hands of the Taliban. It was only a matter of hours. And his men's final attempt to reassure the population with a heroic march through the streets of the capital of the province couldn't fool anyone. That night, a new destiny started to take shape. Several generals opted to be evacuated from Afghanistan by the Americans. But Amiry and one of his close friends, Ahmad Massoud, refused. They resolved to carry on fighting. The battle would take place in Kabul. Amiry and his Special Forces unit, the KKA, headed towards the Afghan capital.
ساعت 11 شب بود، 14 اگست. قطعه ما در ساحه شرق کابل که در سمت پلچرخی کابل میشه موقعیت داره و ما به چشم میبینم درگیری در زندان پلچرخی جریان داره و همچنان در یک تعداد از واتساپ گروپ های اطلاعاتی که هستیم که همه ارگانهای امنیتی در گروپ ها هستن، معلومات که من میبینم طالب از دروازه لوگر و از دروازه وردک هم داخل کابل شده.
Panic spread throughout Kabul. The president of the republic, Ashraf Ghani, had fled. The Taliban, who had been stationed at the city gates until now, infiltrated without opposition on the morning of the 15th of August. The population was in dire straits. Khalid Amiry awaited orders from the military chief of staff to restrain the Taliban, but the orders never came. The administration was in a state of disarray. The army too. It was too late.
همزمان ما آمادگی برای رفتن به پنجشیر گرفتیم. ما فهمیدیم که کابل سقوط میکنه و طالب عملا داخل کابل شدن و وضعیت به طرف سقوط و فروپاشی پیش میره.
Another military commander from Panjshir, who is currently in hiding in Afghanistan, describes the beginnings of the resistance.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. مسیر راه تهدیدات زیاد بود. اگر ما زمینی می‌رفتیم به مشکلات مواجه می‌شدیم. بنان صرف نظر کردیم رفتیم داخل میدان. برام گرفتیم که از طریق ترانسپورت هوایی انتقال بدیم پرسنل سلاح و تجهیزات به پنجشیر.
وقتی در میدان هوایی کابل رسیدیم، افراد خود ما در قسمتی هست. بعد از او باز افراد خود نزدیک به طیاره ساختم و دنبال از این میگشتیم که پیلوت پیدا بکنیم تا به طرف پنجشیر بریم.
تعدادی از پیلوت‌ها به قطر انتقال شده بودند، تعداد دیگه‌ش هم به ازبکستان انتقال شده بودند. هلیکوپترهایی که در میدان هوایی باقی مونده بود در قوه هوایی مشکلات خود داشتند، مواد سوخت نداشتند.
At the time, Fazel Manawi was the Minister of Justice. On the morning of the 15th of August, he was at work. The locals were rushing out of the city in a crazed panic, and his staff were fleeing. While his fellow ministers were running for their lives, Manawi tried something different.
ما مجبور شدم که لباسای خدا عوض کنم و از خانه دکتر عبدالله برایم. شب همون روز ما در خانه یکی از دوستا پنهان شدیم و فردا در نقش یک تاکسی درایور به پنجشیر رفتیم.
در مشکل دو بال طیاره را آماده ساختن. آمدیم افراد خود اول تعداد زیادی از سلاح را بالا کنیم با تعداد کمی از افراد. در دو طیاره ششته بودیم که در طیاره اول پیلوت نزدیک به پرواز بود، طیاره را خاموش کرد و پایین شویم، طیاره خراب شده. ما عاجل پایین شدیم و سلاح را پایین کردیم. ما در طیاره دوم بالا شدم، یک بال طیاره به طرف پنجشیر حرکت کردیم.
Khalid Amiry made it onto the last helicopter that managed to get out of Kabul. The landing had to take place in the middle of the night at the football stadium at the entrance to the Panjshir Valley. The previous day, Ahmad Massoud, the son of the nation's fallen hero, had flown to Panjshir.
We received a lot of calls. We actually received a call from President Macron's office proposing that we leave the country and that President Macron has ordered a plane to come and evacuate us. When I conveyed this to Mr. Massoud and a few other countries as well conveyed the same message, he said no.
At that time, on 15th of August, the resistance was non-existent. So when I went to Panjshir Valley, I knew very well and clearly that we are not prepared and there is absolutely nothing that anyone would do to help us. But I had to make a choice to leave my people or stay with them.
The National Resistance Front, led by Ahmad Massoud, was created from a state of complete unreadiness. It was as if no one had been able to anticipate the events and predict the next move. While the self-appointed leader of the resistance was taking off, a little further away on the same tarmac, the population was desperately trying to escape the Taliban. There is only one way into the Panjshir Valley, a winding road set between steep mountains. The convoys of men preparing for combat entered via this narrow corridor.
تنها بعض قطعات از اردو و پلیس داخل پنجشیر آمدن، اما دیگرها در ولایت‌های خودشان باقی ماندن. تنها از پروان و کاپیسا، قسما از بغلان و قطعاتی که از کندوز و تخار شکست خورده بودن اقتداد به پنجشیر آمدن. و ما می‌فهمیدیم که طالبا جز تسلیمی چیز دیگر انتظار ندارن و ما شروع کردیم به که تدابیر دفاعی را بگیریم که طالبا نتونن داخل پنجشیر شن.
Munib Amiry, another Afghan Special Forces officer, came to join his brother Khalid in Panjshir. He arrived from the north of Afghanistan, where his face had been badly wounded in a fight against the Taliban.
5 سال که از مقاومت در اول و تا حال که او جنگیدن تجربه کافی دارن و حمایه کافی از کشورها در عقبشان است و چطور میتونه و همین نیروهای امنیتی جمهوریت هم که سقوط کرد، صلاح و تجهیزات، همه چیزی که به دست طالب ماند.
With Kabul captured, the Taliban rushed to Panjshir. They filmed themselves as they gathered in large crowds outside the entrance to the Panjshir Valley. Over a period of 2 weeks, the Taliban would negotiate with the resistance to try to convince them to accept the conditions of their defeat. Following an ultimatum, the National Resistance Front still refused to surrender.
Panjshir khatos مرګري روان دي سره ساعت وخت ورکړای نو کچېره تسلیم سوله نو قدر کا او که تسلیم نشي نو بس ان شاء الله په خپل سزا به ورسیږي.
The Taliban deployed their forces and advanced on several fronts in the valley. The commanders of the resistance were anxious. At that time, Khalid Amiry had not yet become the military leader of Panjshir, but he was about to step into the position.
Khalid Amiry is my brother. He is the commander on the ground, and he is the figure which I respect and I love as brother. And the thing was, we started to defend with whatever we had in our hand. And of course, a lot of things that we had, it was not proper, and the resistance from the ground was being created.
The Taliban had no intention of only seizing the valley. They blocked the access routes and started making their way up the mountain. Behind the radio relay antennas visible in this footage, Khalid Amiry lay in wait on a slope facing the Taliban. Propped up against the rusting remains of a Soviet tank, he was trying to counter the movement of the Taliban units. A battle between snipers broke out in the Panjshir mountains. But it proved impossible to hold their position. A few skirmishes were not enough to slow down the Taliban. Amiry and his men abandoned their mountain post and moved to another valley.
طالب هیچ گزینه به جز جنگ برای ما نمانده. طالب به هیچ یک از ارزش‌های انسانی و اسلامی پابند نیست. جز قتل، کشتار، ایجاد وحشت، انحصار، محرومیت از درس و تحصیل و حقوق اساسی مردم هیچ کاری نمی‌کنند.
The position in the main valley was strained. The mausoleum dedicated to Commander Massoud, the national hero, was a symbolic place for the people of Panjshir. However, it was also a strategic location as it overlooked the road that runs from one side of the province to the other. It was here that Khalid Amiry positioned himself while the Taliban continued to advance towards the north of the province. The battle at the mausoleum would be the last one to take place in the valley. A few hours later, the mausoleum was captured by the Taliban. 20 days after the fall of Kabul, Panjshir also yielded. The figures, though unverifiable, suggest that there were tens of thousands of well-equipped Taliban soldiers dispersed through the province. The defeat weighed heavily on all of them. In this photo, Khalid Amiry, his brother, 2 other commanders and Saleh Registani, who was still the leader of the resistance in Panjshir at that time, look exhausted and downhearted. But the following day, they filmed this video in defiance of the Taliban.
امروز پنجشیر قلب افغانستان است و به نمایندگی از افغانستان و آرزوهای مردم افغانستان که عبارت از صلح و یک حکومت عادل است دفاع می‌کند. باید به طالبان و همه کسانی که طرفدار اونا هستند بگویم که وارد شدن طالبان در پنجشیر به هیچ صورت به معنای پایان جنگ نیست، بلکه این آغاز جنگ است.
Their bravado was short-lived. A few days later, many of these men, physically weakened, left Afghanistan to go to a neighboring country, Tajikistan, where the political head of the resistance was based. But Khalid Amiry refused to leave.
وقتی که ما میبرامدیم ما خال داشتم بیا که با هم بریم هر وقت یک جمع دیگه هم همراه ما میبرامدن هر وقت که زمینه و مسائل چه وضعیت خوب شد مایه گپا تنظیم شد دوباره پس مییم ما هستیم نعمتن ما دفاع میکنیم از ارزش ما خالد همه جا ما گفتم نه برو تو ما هستم همیشه ما هم اگه برایم دیگه چیزی اینجا نمیمونه هستیم این مقاومت استاد بکنیم این مقاومت رونق بدیم تا بتونیم درست از این ارزش‌ها و از مردم از وطن ما از تاریخ ما دفاع بکنیم و خالد ماندن و پنجشیر ما برفتم و تداوی برآمدم از افغانستان.
That day, Khalid Amiry took over as leader of the resistance army in Panjshir. He prepared to spend his first winter in hiding together with his men. The groups of combatants filmed their day-to-day activities from their mountain refuge. These videos were saved on their phones until now. They demonstrate the strength of their esprit de corps. Khalid Amiry even joined in to film his own men.
ما رفتیم به قرارگاه دوره جهاد البته در قرارگاه دوره جهاد تدابیر گرفته شده بود به خاطر مشکلات پیش بینی شده بود که در صورت اگر مشکلی در ولایت پنجشیر رونما می شود مجاهدین و مبارزینی که در اینجا هستند بتوانند مدتی را در قرارگاه سپری بکنند.
بدون شک زندگی کردن در کوه از لحاظ سهولت‌های زندگی با شهر و روستا بسیار تفاوت دارد و سخت است، اما زندگی کردن در کوه‌ها به خاطر یک هدف مقدس یک حس غرور و آزادی عجیب و وصف ناپذیر برای آدم دست میده که نمیشه که من او را با کلمات بیان بکنم.
الله اکبر الله اکبر الله اکبر الله اکبر.
The National Resistance Front carried out its final ambushes as the freezing winter struck Panjshir. This was a reminder to the Taliban that although they might control the valley, the mountains were still the exclusive territory of the Mujahedin.
We have only one enemy, and that's Taliban. During winter, we had the weather, the snow, and we have the Taliban. It is suicidal to fight in a situation when they have enemy like that and with the winter which is coming.
At the head of the fighter units, Khalid Amiry marched into winter. Silence enveloped the mountains. The resistance had lost the war. But another unconventional form of combat, guerrilla warfare, would soon rage through the mountains, right after this brief lull imposed by winter. In the spring, a group of journalists gained access to one of the 22 camps that the resistance claimed to have in the mountain valleys, an unprecedented encounter. Approximately 50 armed fighters showed us their weapons and consented to being filmed. Several commanders were present. They explained that they recruit volunteers from the age of 18 and trained them in guerrilla warfare, the mode of combat that Ahmad Massoud excelled in.
چون به خودتان معلوم است تمام ولایات افغانستان طالبان گرفتن تمام سلاح تجهیزاتی که از اردوی سابق بود به دست دشمن رفتید چه از بخش کماندو بود چه از بخش پلیس بود چه از بخش امنیت بود ما در شرایط فعلی جز جنگ چریکی دیگر راه نداریم میرفتیم جنگ چریکی میکردیم عملات انجام میدادن 100 نفر 200 نفرش هم که ما میکشتیم بالاخره لشکرکشی میکردن میآمدن در کوه برف است راه کوتالاش بند است ما دیگه سایه عقب نشینی نداشتیم به همین خاطر بودت که ما عملات چریکی خود نکردیم و حال زمینه مساعد شود انشاءالله الرحمن عملات چریکی ما خود شد.
But the resistance couldn't conceal its weakness, its isolation, the sense that the future was bleak.
مردم خود نان میخورن سلاح بدون نان سلاح نمیشه ایره فراهم کرده میتونه با یک کمی مشکلات چالش ها چون مسیرهای مواصلاتی ما اکمالات ما به دست دشمن است و دشمن هم گاه مزاحمت میکنه با وجود از او مردم همراه ما همکاری میکنه با همکاری و حمایت مردم ما قرارگاه ما را اکمال میکنیم.
The combatants were proud to have a foreign TV network interested in their cause, and they arranged this performance as proof of their allegiance to Ahmad Massoud, the Panjshir hero, whose memory guides their every action.
تمام مبارزینی که مسلحانه در برابر طالب می جنگند یک تفاوت با گذشته دارند که نیاز نیست که برای اینا ساعتها توضیح داده شود که به خاطر چی جنگ میکنن. فکر میکنم که یک بخشش به لطف فضای باز نسبی که در 20 سال گذشته وجود داشت همه مردم در یک سطح از آگاهی رسیدن و میفهمند که ریشه جنگ افغانستان در کجا است.
امروز یک شنبه تاریخ 18 ثور است. یعنی نیروهای طالبان است که تازه وارد پنجشیر شده است. اینا هم به خاطر مردار شدن داخل ولایت پنجشیر شده است.
The resident filming the Taliban forces as they drive past his window seems convinced of the outcome of the conflict. In the spring of 2022, there was significant support for the resistance from the Panjshir population. In preparation for the resumption of the attacks in the spring, the Taliban sent new reinforcements into Panjshir. 20,000 men, 30,000, or even more? The numbers are unverifiable. Khalid Amiry resumed his ambushes from the peaks of the Panjshir Valley. On the 26th of May, approximately 50 of his men confronted 200 Taliban soldiers who tried to force them out. The resistance fighters continued filming their attacks.
نعره تکبیر.
After the ambush, the National Resistance Front say that 25 Taliban soldiers were killed and 12 others injured, with not a single victim on their side. But the victory was short-lived. Their camps were suffering more and more attacks from the Taliban.
کار خود شروع کردیم با همه مشکلاتش متاسفانه بسیار خوب ما کماندانای بسیار خوب در پنجشیر در شروعش تلفات داشت، شهید دادیم، زخمی دادیم، نصیر شدن و طالبان با تمام قوتی که دمی 33 ولایت داشت جمع کرد و تعداد طالبای خود پنجشیر هم که
Falling back among the mountains, the resistance fighters were forced to bury their fallen on the battlefield.
مال مردمشان از وطن ناموسشان دفاع بکنند. خوشبختانه که در نهایت جهاد مقاومت برای بازداری از وطن و حقشان بشود.
Khalid Amiry was fully aware that the Taliban were pursuing a strategy of exhaustion. Shortages of weapons, ammunition and food were becoming serious.
واقعا بسیار روز خرابی است در کوههای کیجاوکار دشمن. 3 روز بود. 3 روز پیش از بیرحمانه توسط گروه های مزدور اجنبی به شهادت رسیدند. فعلا هم شهدای ما در اونجا باقی است. ولی بعد از 3 روز تلاش در کوه ها چیزی پیدا نمیشد و بالاخره مجبور شدیم که با و خدا کنه که بتانیم از گوشت ازی هم یک استفاده معقول خوبتر بهتر با دیگه مجاهدینی که در اطراف مناسب با او هم دیگه برسه.
The resistance had only itself to rely on.
حالت طبیعی است. توقع جنگجویان ما این است که همه چیز باید به زمانش برسه برایشان، ولی ما توقع را پورا کرده نمیتونیم و دلیل اینه که ما راه نه زمینی و نه هوایی از دوشنبه و داخل نداریم. ما از راههای پنهانی از دست دوم، سوم، چهارم استفاده میکنیم که سلاح، مهمات، پول و امکانات بفرستیم. طبیعی است که گاهی او به زمانش نمیرسه، گاهی هم.
So from a pragmatic point of view, I would find it unlikely that the NRF or any other group that exists today would succeed in substantially challenging the Taliban or bring about positive change inside the country. Our line is clear. We do not provide material, political or other support for armed resistance. It would almost automatically mean that others would support other groups and we would see the risk of probably initially a low-intensity civil war, possibly escalating further and leading to further instability in the region.
بچه‌ها شما انداخت نکنین بازم تا که نمیبینین انداخت نکنین بچه‌ها تا که نمیبینین انداخت نکنین اونیم که مرمی‌ها خود خلاص کنن.
Given the shortage of arms, each attack had to be carefully planned. That day, Khalid Amiry gave the order to fire. The helicopter is hit. It was bringing supplies to the Taliban troops who had come to track the resistance. Khalid Amiry, visible here in a headscarf, wanted to capture all the passengers. Before setting fire to the helicopter, he posed for a photo in the cockpit. This successful attack boosted the combatants' morale. The story spread through the villages in the valley, and Khalid Amiry interrogated one of the prisoners himself.
ما خو تقریبا نن به ان شاء الله تعالی 2 شپې پر کېږي 2 شپې به ورځي اسما ته خو تقریبا په دغه 2 شپو 2 ورځې کې یعنی کله خوراک د طرفه څخه هیڅ کدي څه کم شیخ خپل د ځان لپاره پیدا کړی مونږ هم راکړی.
The story was widely shared on social media. It reveals a commander who respects the rules of war and his prisoners. But this respite would be short-lived. A few days later, another helicopter arrived to drop off supplies for the Taliban forces in the Azu mountains. Since the Taliban came to power, the resistance has been developing in some of the neighboring provinces. But the strength of the Taliban's rule has always been strongest and most visible in Panjshir. Checkpoints are dotted across the territory, stretching hundreds of kilometers from north to south. The Taliban forces are frequently reinforced. This unit has arrived from Kunar, one of the eastern provinces of Afghanistan. Its mission? To destroy the National Resistance Front and its combatants once and for all.
چری کام لاو کې د چغال پر کم عمله وکي نور نه ورکی د چغال پر کم یو ځای کمین ولې نور ورکتی و نور نه مانمیش داسې مخامخ د مخامخ جنگ نه دی د مخامخ جنگ توان نه لري دوی دشمن کمزوری دی بس د چغال حمله کړي بس یو مجاهد خوش کړي یا یو دوه خوش کړي دي نور مشکل نشته الحمدلله بس دا د چغال حمله کړي نور مشکل نشته دشمن ورک دی دشمن ضعیف دی ډیر مجاهدین ډیر د قوي حالت په دغه کې دي قوي دي مجاهدین قوي دي مخامخ د جنگ توان نه لري دشمن زیات ډیر دي چې دا غاړه راواخې کمربند دی زه پر ځای کې 50 کاسه اوس دلته موږ ډیری 50 موږ 90 کاسه یو موږ خپل د مازه دا راغلي 90 کاسه.
This Taliban commander didn't mention any names, but he was referring to Amiry, the most renowned commander in Panjshir, and the most elusive as well. On the anniversary of the Taliban's arrival to power, Khalid Amiry planned to strike back hard to make an impact.
گپ آخر اینمی عملیاتی که ما شما ساعت 5 بجه صبح میکنیم از جمله 28 قرارگاه ما 24 قرارگاه که عملا وجود داره فعال هستند 24 قرارگاه تقریبا یک دست کماندو در سر تا سر پنجشیر همگی فردا صبح روز پیروزی طالب است کابل گرفته بود سبا 15 اگست که روز پیروزی طالب است ببینید سبا فقط پیروزی را ما شما سر تا سر پنجشیر و اجزا را میسازیم همگی سبا بخیر یک ناشر عمومی در سر دشمن است وضعیتشان هم چندان خوب نیست دیگه انشالله با این بازوهای توانای شما و این همت شما دیگه ببینیم که یک دستاورد خوبتر و با عزت‌تر و همگی ما شما باشه
نعره تکبیر نعره تکبیر نعره تکبیر.
The resistance units would engage in combat throughout the entire province. Amiry would be stationed in the Azu Valley, the same location in which the helicopter had been shot down a few weeks earlier. Since that day, the Taliban had set up their camp near to the destroyed aircraft. 50 men in their white tents are visible on these satellite images. The military leader of Panjshir decided to strike back here. The commander relayed his final orders via radio. The battle would go on for 3 hours.
Come, منفردو. Here we go.
Some Taliban fighters surrendered. Khalid Amiry, 2 other commanding officers and their men went to take the prisoners next to the helicopter and the camp. It was the most significant seizure since the Taliban occupation of Panjshir started almost a year ago. The operation allowed the resistance to replenish their weapons and ammunition stock. But they had to set the prisoners free. The day after the attack, the commander, still in close proximity to the battlefield, explains their actions in a remote interview.
با تعداد 40 نفر دشمن اسیر گرفتیم و با تعداد 5 نفرشان کشته شد 3 نفر زخمی شد محترمانه با رعایت تمام قوانین جنگی برشان احترام گذاشتیم زخمیاشون تداوی کردیم برای خود ازوا یک مقدار کرایه راه برشان دادیم و رخصتشان کردیم گفتیم برین به پیش خانواده‌تان و همچنان برشان فهماندیم که جنگ از یا به خاطر چیز و چرا ناحق است و ما جنگ ما به خاطر نفرت و به خاطر جنگ نیست به این خاطر
Military treatment clearly in line with the rules of war. But in reality, Khalid Amiry had no choice but to liberate the prisoners. It would be impossible for him to feed so many men. Impossible to take them up into the mountains without running the risk of revealing the resistance hideouts. The enemy's retaliation came quickly. Down in the valley, every member of the population, whether young or old, became a potential suspect thought to be colluding with the resistance. In 2021 and 2022, Amnesty International and the UN made several reports detailing the arbitrary arrests and abuse committed by the Taliban in Panjshir. This man's arrest evoked outrage on social media. He is a primary school teacher. The Taliban soldier filming the teacher tries to present him as part of the resistance. This was a key part of their strategy of reprisals, to get the Mujahedin to stop fighting and to deter the population from supporting their actions. The teacher would finally be released a few days later. Why did the resistance fighters stay away from the valley? Was it to spare the villagers, or was it because they were cornered? As Commander Yar, one of Khalid Amiry's faithful supporters, suggests, their only weapons, a Russian machine gun and rocket launcher dating back to the Soviet war in the 80s. A few days after filming this footage, Commander Yar, his unit and a few other men were captured by the Taliban. Surrounded and without any means of escape, they surrendered. The Taliban filmed each stage of their arrest. The footage went viral on social media. Commander Yar even allowed himself this final act of rebellion against the Taliban, who were reveling in their capture. These arrests seriously impacted the resistance, because the commander was captured with his brother and 1, 2, 3 of his sons. But the footage of humiliation and terror does not stop there. The prisoners, blindfolded and with their hands tied, were placed with their backs to the firing squad. One of Commander Yar's sons refused to be humiliated in this way and turned to face the shooters. That day, 9 resistance fighters were executed in cold blood. The Taliban would prohibit the families from retrieving the bodies for several weeks.
مطمئنن که همه آگاهانه داوطلبانه در برابر دشمن سلاح گرفتن و استاد شدن. با یقین گفته میتونیم که هر کدام از اینا را وقتی که آدم میبینه یک کوهی از مورال و انگیزه و غرور هستن.
Il n'y a plus de lien géographique avec des pays pour ravitailler l'opposition. À partir du moment où il n'y a plus cette jonction avec le Tadjikistan, à partir du moment où il n'y a plus que la vallée Panjshir qui est enclavée, enchâssée, c'est très difficile de la fournir en armement lui permettant d'irradier et donc de pénétrer en profondeur vers l'ensemble du pays.
The international community believes that resistance is impossible, that it is game over, that after 40 years, the Taliban have won, and that the conflict in Afghanistan is ending, and that the Taliban is the only reality. Their proposal was, don't sacrifice yourselves for a futile attempt to liberate the country. It's not going to happen.
Another winter descended upon Panjshir, signalling a break in combat. Over the last few months, the losses had been significant for the resistance. Several commanders had been killed and groups decimated. Khalid Amiry and his units remained in position somewhere in the heights of Panjshir. He wouldn't be seen again during the winter, except in this final photo. The resistance is both military and political, and it's in Vienna, Austria that the political wing is engaged. Ahmad Massoud is arriving here for his second conference since the Taliban's takeover. Former Afghan leaders now in exile are behind the invitation. leader of the National Resistance Front is still trying to unite the different opposition movements under his aegis.
در قدم نخست درود می‌فرستم بر روان پاک همه شهدای مقاومت و آزادی افغانستان، شهدای برای آوردن عدالت، برای آوردن آزادی برای مردم مظلوم و مردم تنهای افغانستان. امروز در طول 1.5 سال ما 400 شهید داریم در اقصا نقاط به ترتیب کشور. او هم در یک مبارزه کاملا نابرابر و در حالتی که حرف جناب دکتر سید طرحی در بیرون افغانستان وجود دارد. اگر هر کاری که میکنیم باید خودمان انجام بدیم.
But political and ethnic leaders are not present. They decline the invitation. The resistance embodied by Ahmad Massoud cannot hide its problems. At the Austrian Parliament, the meeting turns into a meaningless show. A souvenir photo to commemorate the visit of the National Resistance Front's leader and a promise to pass his message on to the entire Austrian political class is the only support that Ahmad Massoud receives. There will be no help for the Afghan combatants. European countries are divided on the usefulness of military opposition to the Taliban.
La reprise du conflit n'est sans doute pas la solution au problème afghan. La situation doit passer par un dialogue inter-afghan. Le mouvement de M. Massoud a son rôle à jouer. C'est un des partenaires qui doit être à la table. Et nous n'allons pas au-delà dans notre relation avec ce mouvement.
On voudrait qu'il y ait une alternative aux talibans, mais en même temps, on ne veut pas de guerre civile. On voudrait qu'il y ait un changement de régime, mais en même temps, on ne va pas aider ceux qui pourraient permettre ce changement de régime. Dit autrement, les troupes occidentales sont parties d'Afghanistan. Elles n'y reviendront pas. Les pays régionaux ne vont pas s'impliquer militairement. Donc ça va se régler de manière intra-afghane.
The resistance is still in hiding, still being hunted down. Some of the Panjshir commanders have left Afghanistan to seek refuge in neighbouring countries, Iran and Tajikistan. Those who have chosen to remain inside the country live underground without any means to take a stand.
برادران محترم دوستان عزیز، ما فعلا در حالتی قرار داریم خیلی حالت دشوار است، چون بیرون برآمده نمیتونیم که در فضای باز سپورت بکنیم. در قرنطینه خانه‌ای قرار داریم. دشمن ما را تعقیب داره. هر لحظه و هر ثانیه ما در خطر است. زیر فوکس استخبارات دشمن قرار داریم. به همین اساس ما باید در داخل خانه روزمره زندگی خود پیش ببریم. دیگه یکی از لایه‌های وظایف روزمره ما سپورت است که ما همیشه وقت روزانه 1 ساعت یا زیادتر سپورت میکنیم، چون ما یک مبارز هستیم. باید در هر نوع حالت آماده آمتان باشیم.
Khalid Amiry is no longer in Panjshir, but he is still in Afghanistan.
ما واقعا طرفدار جنگ نیستیم. تا چه وقت مردم ما در جنگ تولد شوند و در جنگ آوارگی بمارند؟ مردم این کشور مثل دیگه مردم دنیا مگر مستحق آرام زندگی کردن ندارند؟
I think there have been too many games played in Afghanistan and about Afghanistan, big games and small games, and not very clean games. So I don't think we should play games. We are there and we continue to provide humanitarian assistance to Afghans in need. And I think perhaps that is a lesson from the past as well, that change in Afghanistan should come, and I think will come from inside the country.
If the people of Afghanistan ask me to accept the Taliban, I will accept it. If my people ask me to stop the war, I will stop it. But I asked you to go around in Afghanistan and outside and ask people, what do they really want? I wish that they would had the choice to pick between Taliban and non-Taliban. That is the whole concept of our war and defending and resistance. So the people can decide for their future.
Since last spring, the attacks have ceased in Panjshir. Most of the resistance fighters have left the mountains, and those who haven't left have become invisible. Down in the valley, calm has been restored. With fewer Taliban forces, there is a semblance of normality. Khalid Amiry, in hiding somewhere in Afghanistan, is always on alert. He now communicates with us via text messages.
نمیتونیم از این استفاده کنیم و از این طریق تغذیه کنیم خدا تا آماده باشیم به خاطر وظایف بعدی که مطابق قانون برنامه انشاءالله و رحمت زمینه مساعد شود برگردیم به وطنمون.